Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce you to my guest today, Jay Vogt. Jay founded Peoplesworth, an organizational development practice that works with mission-driven organizations, which started in 1982. Jay has worked with nonprofits in healthcare, education, human services, arts, culture, environment, and more. He has worked with fast growth companies in the organic food world like Stonyfield and Applegate. Jay is a master facilitator of meetings and retreats and specializes in leading large group meetings of 35 to 350 participants. A published author, Jay's TEDx talk on the art of facilitation, changing the way the world meets, has been viewed nearly 100,000 times. Jay has been married for 35 years, is a proud father of a daughter, and lives just outside of Boston. His passions include travel, trail running, and long-distance walking. And if I might include a little tidbit, Jay and I are both alumni of the same institution, very proudly, Hampshire College in Amherst, Mass.
You're here.
Welcome, Jay.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's great to be on your podcast.
So, Jay, this is a podcast all about transitions and the kinds of things that people have done with their work and their lives. And I know that when we talked earlier, you had talked about that you had made probably your most significant career or work change probably pretty early in your career. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I started my practice, the one that you described in my introduction, when I was 27. And it's a management consultant, organizational development consulting practice. And the career path for that is usually one of two things. People either have a career in industry and then they sell their experience because they've been there and done that. Or they get an MBA and they work for a consulting firm and fly all over the country and they learn all these models and then maybe they go out on their own. And I did neither of those things. I just jumped into private practice at a young age, which is very much against the odds, made my mother very nervous. And I think it was a combination of things. I was fortunate to have an experience of facilitation with some master trainers. And I just felt myself vibrating. This is what I want to do with my life. Facilitate meetings brings out the best in people. I have natural skills and talents in this area. I want to make my contribution here. It just kind of came to me as a calling and an epiphany. And I had no idea how you made money at it or what the career looked like. It's just something I wanted to do more of. And I was able to find a job that allowed me to learn more about this, but it was it was not something that I felt I could really grow in over time. And at the time, I had a colleague who was also working in a bureaucratic institution, and he got a job with this tech company. And they said, if you'd been working in that environment for one more year, we never would have hired you because we would have known you'd lost your edge. And I was looking at my timeline. I'd been at my job for 4 or 5 years, and I was thinking, I'm on a track that I don't like. And I had this skill and this that was unique in the marketplace at that time and that had been developing, and this passion. But I was also kind of racked with fear.
What was that about? I want to find out about the fear, but I'm wondering, was that, when you say you were there for 4 or 5 years, was that essentially your first job out of college, or?
Yes. I'll spare you the little ones, but it was my first professional job. I got decent pay. I had a established role in the community working for this was a university extension service.
Uh-huh. What kind of work were you doing?
I was working in Boston with small nonprofits that didn't have staff, training their boards, and also working in communities around energy conservation and the introduction of solar. I mean, it was really interesting work, but it was not only my first job, Tammy, but it was essentially my only job, because after I left that employment, I've been self-employed for my entire life. It's just really
I see.
an unusual way to go about doing what I've done. The passion was there, but also the fear. And I'm going to describe something to your listeners that may sound simple to them, but I can't express how profound this shift was that I'm about to describe. I was really clear on what I wanted, which was this practice. But every time I imagined leaving my secure job and going out and starting something, I imagined failure. And I oscillated between wanting it and imagining it wouldn't work, wanting it and imagining it wouldn't work. And I was working with a coach at this time. I was in my 20s. I was trying to grow. I was growing in all directions. And this person was paraphrasing my situation and said, so what you want is to start your own practice and you want it to be successful. He said that. It's like I didn't even realize I could have both. I could have what I wanted. It could be a market success. And all of my energy lined up around wanting this thing. And I didn't have that oscillation anymore of like holding myself back. And so I picked a date. I started doing my prep work, building my network, and I left the world of secure employment and essentially never looked back.
So I'm curious about, what do you think was the sort of the pivot point that allowed you to step into that planning process? It sounds like you started to more concretely define what success would look like rather than being kind of wrapped around the fear of a variety of things.
Fear is potentially a useful thought, but it also can really hold us back.
Sure.
And many times when I've coached people who want to take this kind of step, I have to coach them off the ledge of their fear that if they take this risk, everything will fall apart. And in a way, it's a profound act of trust to sort of declare what you want and to focus on that, and then take actions in alignment with it without any certainty that ultimately it will come to pass.
Oh, isn't that true?
Yeah.
And when you say a profound act of trust, that sounds so dramatic in a way, but profound act of trust in what or whom, Jay?
Well, ultimately in me.
Yes. I was hoping you would say that.
Yeah, it's a profound act of trust in me.
Yeah.
But also, I think, I'm a spiritual guy, and I think some bigger forces are at work. And I happen to believe that we're here on this planet for a reason, and we're here to do certain things. And when we are sensitive enough to kind of calibrate where we invest our life force into things that are really, we're meant to do, I think forces line up behind us. So it's trust both in myself and in some greater good that wants me to make my contribution in a certain way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it makes total sense. And I think that when people do believe in that, not that they have to, but when they do, they are more open to allowing that kind of force or energy or those kinds of opportunities, let's say.
Yes.
To show up, and they allow them in, and then they're able to access them and those opportunities or those resources in, and they're able to make better use of them. I think of it akin to when I hear somebody say, for example, well, I was lucky. When they reflect back on a situation where something showed up in their life and they were able to take advantage of it, and they say, well, I was lucky. And I think, well, yes, you were lucky, but when luck shows up, you still have to notice it and you have to grab it and you have to run with it. And
Right.
if you don't, then it's not luck, it's just a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I think that a combination of both wanting something, feeling that calling as you refer to it, and then staying open to what might become available to you, and then, you know, taking advantage of those resources and making use of them as creatively as you can. There's almost like it's like a recipe of things.
Yes. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And for the more scientifically minded listeners, I'd say, chance favors the prepared mind with Louis Pasteur. But the language you've used really resonates with me in a very deep way, because it is a lot about allowing. It is a lot about opening. It is a lot about surrendering. And one of the ways I tried to describe it to people was, when you're in a job, and I imagine many of your listeners are in a job and thinking about doing something that maybe isn't job driven. The world is a world of jobs, and your identity is tied up in your work. What I left that, and then I entered a different river, or a different stream, which is a river of projects, or with just opportunities emerge and then they go away. And one's identity can't be defined by a particular job, because there's nothing that you're committed to 100%. In my case, I had all these different clients, and there are all these things rising and falling and coming and going, and I could kind of predict it, because there was this emergent quality of opportunities and resources that I could have gradually relax into, and knowing something would come. And it just gets us back to trust. And that's, not a great core for a business plan, but it is a big part of what my experience has been.
Well, I would think, though, that even though you weren't, let's say, tied to a job, that there was a thread or some kind of theme that ran through what you were doing, that there was something you were tied to that gave meaning to what you were doing.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And it created, I created a container, if you will, of this practice. And I had, a newsletter I would send out, and I built skills, and I did professional development, and I did a whole lot of things that people have to do to create essentially a brand and an identity.
Right.
I made a choice, which we could talk about a little bit more if you like, to just work in my, in a sense, hometown, my home city of Boston. I focused on a local practice, if you will, and that allowed me to get to know a community very deeply, and the connections of networks. So it was always pretty close at hand, and all within a rich ecosystem of fascinating and world-class, organizational opportunities. So I was making a lot of smart choices, and mean to diminish that. I hedged my bets. In the very beginning, I had bought a 3-decker in Boston, which was in a very rough neighborhood, because it's all I could afford. But I was essentially a landlord, and it kind of covered my housing nut. I was also single at that time, and I didn't have kids, and so I was able to take a little bit more risk. But even so, in the beginning, I did a chunk of what I called mortgage money, which was just in my case, it was what we called stand-up training. It was offering 1 or 2 or 3 day courses for companies, for their employees, and there was this constant need for it. And I was good at it, but it was not my purpose. It was not what I even wanted to do. And in the beginning, that was maybe half of my revenues.
Yeah.
And I just did it, and never lost focus on what my prize was, which was a consulting practice of doing work that I was good at and that I loved. And so I made a whole bunch of compromises and smart choices that relate to the business side. But none of that guarantees any success. At some point, you just have to relax into the uncertainty of it. and start to enjoy it, which I finally did and have for some time now.
Well, it's interesting to hear you talk about that you made compromises and smart choices so that you could tie, when I hear people say I made compromises, sometimes they tie those to that they weren't necessarily honoring their values. But
yes.
It sounds like, in a way, even though you were doing some work that, let's say, that didn't feed your soul, it
Yes.
was feeding other needs that you had at the time.
Yes.
And so it did serve a purpose. It may not have been soulful, but there were other things that had to be taken care of at the time in order for you to build those other things.
I think that's exactly right. And to me, that's wisdom.
Yeah.
I had a primary choice, which was to set up a practice that would feed my soul and serve my community. And I was really clear about that. And I was making like a secondary choice to do these things I didn't particularly want to do to keep me in the game long enough until I could realize my goal. And I struggle with that, frankly, a little bit. One of the reasons I'm speaking about it is I had to rationalize that because it didn't always feel good. But I knew it was the right thing, because the alternative was not to have that money, to have a lot of fear, or to have to go back to a job and go backwards. And
right.
I knew none of those things were better, and most of them were worse.
And it sounds like also, even at that time, you had a vision for the long game. You had your eye. I think what I find happens with a lot of people who have their eye on the prize.
Yeah.
They skip a lot of the steps in between, going from point A to point Z, but they forget that there's 25 letters in the middle.
Yeah.
And they don't see those steps. And so when they don't reach point Z, they get very frustrated and disappointed. And it sounds like you were able to see that some of these things were a means to an end, and that if you remained somewhat patient and on the stayed the course, so to speak, that you could build gradually and get there.
That's absolutely true, and it may not be what people want to hear, but in my case, it was critical. But I was making some choices that felt right to me, and I couldn't quite articulate why. Like, for example, I was now had a wife and a child, and I decided I wanted to be home for dinner at night. So I very pragmatic, I very persistently said yes to local work and no to national work. So I rejected the higher status clients with the higher paying fees. I rejected going to national conferences because you just meet people from all over and they want you to fly. I built a practice that was focused locally, and it worked for me. But I had to deal with this voice in my head saying I wasn't being successful. So I redefined success. I went on like a search saying, well, this has got to be a model here that will tell me I'm doing the right thing. And being in New England, I eventually came upon the image of the country doctor who is a professional, but doesn't build a practice, doesn't hire assistants, just works in one area, maybe with the same people over many years, gets to know them extremely intimately, is trusted and even revered in their community, but never goes outside of that community. And I said, well, that's it. I'm a country doctor for the clients that I serve in Boston.
Yeah.
And just that wiring of my brain, my male brain, allowed me to calm down and just enjoy the fact that I had a home office. I was home for dinner. I was seeing my daughter. She'd come into play. I'd go out, just drive places. I was never getting on planes. And that really worked for me. And fast forward, since we're looking at a career here, years later, I saw many of those same consultants I admired. They got divorces or they burnt out. And some of them even took me aside at some point and said, we really envy what you have. Wish we'd made different choices. And I was like,
isn't that interesting?
blown away by that.
Yeah. And what's interesting also is that at the time you were making those choices, you were questioning it
Yes.
all along the
Yes.
way.
Yes.
And I do think that there is somewhat of a societal idea, and I think it's very American, bigger is better. You have to aspire to the national, the more money, all of this, when in fact there was every good reason to stay close to home. And who's to say that I'm sure that you were able to increase revenue and build a very solid business locally. I mean,
Yes.
I know I've done it. I mean, I have some clients that I work with, nationally and internationally, but it doesn't necessarily require, especially in this day and age, it doesn't require you to necessarily get on a plane all the time.
Yes.
So, there are ways to build a business and a practice without being on the road all the time. So I'm curious, it took you a while, though, it sounds like, to kind of make peace with that sort of story in your head about what made you define success in that way.
It did. And, I think something else that's emerging in this conversation is worth kind of naming, which is that having left behind the sort of some of the tethers, first of identifying with a job and all that entails, not to mention benefits and salary and paid training and paid vacations, walking away, all that stuff. I don't know why people care about that. And then having to deal with my own demons about what is success. Once I sort of cut a lot of those tethers and started really going my own way and listening to my own drummer, something started to emerge, which is that there's a freedom to design a life that is free of some of these strictures. And so, we started to do things that people just don't do. At the time, my wife was a teacher, and I started mimicking her lifestyle, just like taking time off and being paid, in effect, in time rather than in money, because my rate, my earnings would go down, but I was like having this remarkable life. And over at some point in our marriage, we did this thing we always wanted to do. We took a sabbatical. We took 5 months off. It took us 2 years to save the money. We had no money. We were just like backpacking, went all around Asia. It was kind of our honeymoon. It was incredible for our marriage. Later on, we did it with our daughter. We took her to Mexico and lived for 6 months there. We've done other like sabbaticals. And what I started to discover, I was so afraid that my clients would think that I was like not committed. But they started to tell me how much they respected the choice I was making and that they wished that they could do that same thing. And I rose in their esteem from making these choices that were so, for the marketplace, unconventional.
Yeah.
Which was a complete surprise to me. And my practice, it was like pruning a plant. I would leave and come back and things would get stronger. It was counterintuitive, but that kind of feedback that, hey, if you do something that feels really right, even if it's unconventional and people tell you it's wrong, something good can come out of it. It started making me think, well, what else could I design in my life? I'm making choices around location. I'm making choices around time. I'm making choices around family, and I'm making choices around mission, the work that I'm doing, and it just keeps going at a certain point, and one engages in a process where you're not just doing your work, but you're actually, in my case, it's like designing a life that really
it is
works.
Absolutely. What do you think it was about these choices that you made that made other people hold you in this sort of place, really revere you for making these choices and for for your business being quite robust?
I have a business answer to that and a more personal one. From a business point of view, I'm a consultant to people and organizations, and I'm not in an organization. I'm a solo practitioner, so I design my life so it's relatively simple and relatively calm, and I have time to exercise and meditate and eat well and take care of myself. And it isn't just selfish. I need to be present and fully awake and alive to serve my clients because they're overwhelmed, they're exhausted, their attention is fragmented, they have a million things going on, and that's the American workplace right now. So if I'm like that, I can't be of any service to them. So right. I tell people, I'm doing this for you. Yeah. I need to find that calm place to add the value that I'm committed to adding to my clients. So there's a business sort of rationale of self-care, if you will. It's an investment that pays dividends. And I think, your comment about society a moment ago is really on point, that we are governed by a whole set of rules about how we are supposed to live life that we don't even know are shaping us. And as someone in the tribe goes off and does something a little different, people say, wow, is that even possible? And it looks like something I might like to do, but I've never given myself permission. So I think it's not like an envy, it's more like a recognition that there's probably more than what we're allowing ourselves to experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the other thing that occurs to me about what you've done is it's not so much that everybody else should go and do things the way you've done them.
No.
As much as that when people interact with you or have direct contact with you, what they're getting is probably an interaction with a calm and grounded human being,
yeah,
who offers them a perspective that they are probably craving.
Yes.
And what they're also sensing is that you are always striving to be your most genuine, authentic self, which when I hear myself say that, I say, oh, everybody says that,
right.
Or you hear life-work balance. And I always want to gag a little bit when I hear that phrase, because I don't really believe there is such a thing as life-work balance, because we're human. So there's no such thing as real balance. I always call it life-work blend, because it is a blend. I love what you say about designing your life, because it's a life. If you're loving what you're doing, it doesn't really matter whether you call it life or work or whatever. It's just life, right?
That's right.
But what I do think people are picking up on is that when they get J Vogt, they're getting the real person. It's not just some professional persona, some side of him. So if they get you in a work context, they're getting the professional side of you. But if they sit down and have a drink with you, they're also going to get a taste of who you are. It's not going to be all that different.
Right.
And so I think when they hear that you've taken your daughter and your wife and gone and lived in Mexico for 6 months,
right,
you're going to say, wow, this is a guy who's living true to himself and his family. And that is, and they trust that you've got everything handled, and that there's just something about that kind of authenticity, I guess, that makes you even more trustworthy, and I think sends a message to people. This is somebody who knows what he's doing. He didn't just pick up one day and say to everyone, hey, I can't make the meeting next week because I'm going to Mexico for 6 months.
Right.
And so I can totally understand why your business was able to, not only sustain but exceed some of these trips and sabbaticals that you took. So
yeah, you're definitely getting it, and I really appreciate that. My brand, my practice name is Peoplesworth, and it actually came to me in meditation. And in the early 80s, that I got feedback from people that it was too touchy-feely. And I was like, fine, whatever, I'm going with this. I feel really right about it. And over the course of my career, I've had other people come up who are branding experts and say, wow, this is an unbelievable brand. And so it's like I grew into it. It was hard at first to embrace that I was revealing to people I care about the worth of people. That's my fundamental operating principle. And I'm going to broadcast that. But it's like the world has shifted where people, love the fact that I talk about spirit and harmony in the workplace. That was a little scary to people when I started.
yeah,
And you talk about the blend. I do not believe, I work a lot, but I don't believe I'm a workaholic or anything close.
right.
And yet, if you were to just look at me, like my wife and I will be working on a Saturday or a Sunday, but we're kind of having fun at it.
Yeah.
But also we'll take, like last Tuesday, I took the whole day off and just went and climbed a mountain with an old college buddy. Or when my kid was younger, I'd take off in the afternoon and coach soccer, or I'd walk her to school. And so I steal time from the work world and put my personal life in, and then I steal time from the personal time, put my work in. And I'm aware of the trade. I take more time off than the average person does.
Right. Exactly. But it's interesting how many people still in this day and age, let's say even in our generation, let's talk about the boomers for a minute.
Yeah.
Because I think those are the people who I'm hoping, I know there are people younger than us listening to this, but I also know there are a lot of boomers listening.
Sure.
And I don't know that they are allowing themselves to think of what their options and choices are. And I think that people like us who are very entrepreneurial in our approach to things, we've really grown accustomed to thinking flexibly in that way.
Yes.
And we have that it's really become part of our DNA, so to speak. Not everybody allows themselves that kind of thinking, and there's all kinds of good reasons for that. I'm not saying that in a way that is like, they're wrong, because many of us were raised by either parents or had grandparents in our lives who, lived during the Depression, when, there's a huge amount of influence from that, right? When, you just don't think about what your choices are. You just put food on the table and a roof over your head. And if you have that, you don't think about what's going to make you happy. You just take care of the basics.
Yes.
So, and that mentality really was pervasive in so many ways and passed down to our generation. So I think about, those people listening now and saying, wow, I wish I could even think, that way half the time. Or how would I even begin to just start to try to be even more true to myself in my day-to-day working life? Jay, I think you are the epitome of somebody from a fairly young age where you started to really strive to be your authentic self in your day-to-day life, whether it be work or life or whatever. And yes, you made compromises along the way, but you made compromises with a vision. You had a vision. Not everybody has a vision at that young an age.
Yeah.
I know I didn't find coaching till I was close to 40.
Right.
And so I had a vision even before that, but I dabbled in a lot of different things before I found coaching.
I have a couple thoughts. My wife and I are working with a quotation from David White, the poet.
Oh, I love him.
A lot in organizations that really stirs something in us. And he said, anything or anyone that does not make you come alive is too small for you. So he's not saying do this with your life. He's just saying notice if the choices you're making are making you come alive. It's not even talking about happiness or success. It's just, are you feeling alive? And so in the moment, we can pay attention. Is this encounter making me come alive? Is it like awakening something in me? And then say yes to more of that. And if this encounter or this place is like deadening that sense of aliveness, then maybe try to say no to that. And just start there, like feel the energy of what it means to come alive and what it means to diminish and to be, I guess I have to say deadened or numbed.
Yeah.
That's a starting point.
And that could be small things.
It could be totally small things. It could be just like, this one person brings me down, so I'm going to spend less time with them. Another thought exercise that I found really helpful, and again, I use the word thought exercise like you don't have to believe this. You just try it on and see if it adds value. It was an idea I got from a book, I think it was called Wishcraft or something. But the first question was, well, if you had 5 other lives to live, what would you be? It's fun, almost like a party game. And for me, it would be, well, I'd be a writer, or I could be a monk, or I could be a globe trotter, or I could lead outdoor trips, things like that. I already have family man and consultant and stuff like that. So then the question becomes, so let's imagine that you don't have 5 other lives, but you're going to try to fold some of those alternate lives into this life. Well, what would that look like? Well, I could write, if I could be a writer full time in another life, well, I could write an article in this life. Or if I could see myself being a monk in another life, I can go on a weekend spiritual retreat in this life. Or if I could be, a full-time traveler or what have you, I could take a little vacation and go to Europe rather than to Florida. Or, if I love the outdoors, I could take that Tuesday and just go climb a mountain with my buddy. I can build these little strands of my other lives to this life without changing the dominant paradigm or structure of the current life that I have. Just by being aware of those and then looking for opportunities to kind of insert them. I found that really fun. And I offer it as something for people to play with who are listening.
I love that. That's great. Well, Jay, as I can tell, and I bet you could tell, you and I could go on and on forever with this conversation. And I don't even know if we covered everything we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, no, I really don't know either.
And I know that we're going to include a lot of links and things in the show notes so people can learn more about your work. Is there anything we didn't cover so far that you want to make sure our listeners are aware of?
Well, there's just one other thing. When people look at the links, they'll see Peoplesworth, which is my consulting practice, and that's what we've talked about today. In my 50s, I got restless for a bunch of reasons, and I won't go into all of that, but I ended up starting 2 other businesses later in life. And one was a internet-based business called Essentialworth with a partner who's since left that business. And the other was a real estate development company in Mexico with a couple of partners. And the content of those is not so important. It's just to say that even late in life, we can make big and bold choices. And I was still looking ahead to a time in life when I would want to do less consulting and wanted to have other things occupy me. And I, in effect, turned kind of hobbies. It's a cliche, but I turned hobbies into businesses. So it's other stories we won't deal with, but people will see those links and they should know that that's choices that I made later in life to kind of upset the apple cart a little bit and try some different things, take some risks, and learn some new skills, even as some new tricks, even as an old dog.
Oh, I don't know if I could ever think of you as an old dog, but I appreciate you mentioning that, because I do hear, and I'm sure you hear people say all the time, I'm too old to start something new.
Yeah, a quick story to match that is a colleague of mine who tried and sort of failed at a whole bunch of things during his career. He just never got out of the gate, but he tried so hard, and he's a great guy, great colleague. I love him. He went back to school and got a PhD, which I thought was the ultimate retreat from reality. But I was so wrong, because he was so enlivened by that experience, and he met people. His consulting practice just exploded overnight, and now he's making all kinds of money. He's getting all kinds of recognition. He kind of retreated from the world, did this thing he really cared about, and it just propelled him back into the world. It's been incredible to watch. This is in his 60s.
Wow.
PhD in his 60s.
Oh, I think I'm going to have to get his name from you and have him.
Okay. Yeah, you can't end one without planning the next, right, Sammy?
Believe me, every time I hear stories like this, I'm like, oh my God.
Well, that's why these podcasts are so great. They can be so inspiring for people.
Well,
Thank you for doing
I'm so glad that we have reconnected after all these years, and this has been a pure delight.
Same.
I am looking forward to seeing where things go with Peoplesworth as you go forward. And thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome. It was a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jay Vogt. It was so interesting to speak with him and learn about his early background and how he has navigated his entrepreneurial path. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? Is there something you'll put into action that you'll benefit from for years to come? Share what resonated with you in the show notes at workfromtheinsideout.com. Look for episode 046. That's also where you'll find all the links and resources from today's podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Jay, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find my page at tammygulerloeb.com/Apple. Thanks so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows, maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.